How do we measure spiritual progress? I want to answer this question a couple different ways, but I'm also going to paraphrase or actually use other people's answers because I, I thought they were rather succinct and worked very well for this. Probably one of the best ways I've heard the question answered was when someone asked Ramana Maharshi, how do we measure our spiritual progress? How do we know? And he answered, by the absence of thought, you can gauge spiritual progress. This is very profound, something I agree with strongly. And I think it's often overlooked. So many times I'll hear of people saying they've awakened, but they struggle with thought. The constant chatter, it goes on and on, thinking about this, that, the other thing, worry. And I don't believe you could really call that awakening. So, in my own awakening, when I was finally truly present for the first time in my life, there was a silence of mind. There was no thought. And in that moment, there was kind of an awakening. And I realized the non-dual nature of reality. After that, there hasn't been a whole lot of rampant thought. When I need it, I can think. When I don't need it, a lot of times there's no thought. There's a silence of mind that just sits, abiding in silence most of the time. And it's not special. It's not special in any way. Eckhart Tolle also talked about sometimes having, hours pass between thoughts. Many spiritual teachers. Why would Ramana Maharshi say you could gauge spiritual progress by the absence of thought if he too did not notice that there was a silence of mind? So that's probably one of the ways to gauge spiritual progress. The other one, I would say, is by your degree of joy and peace in your life. Now, if you wanted to deify this, I know a lot of the more people the more theistic people will tend to say by your closeness to God. But a lot of times that will translate to joy and peace, depending on the conversations. So I would say by the degree of your joy and peace in your life. Now, on the other side of the coin, the flip side is by the absence of suffering. So you can gauge your spiritual progress by the degree that suffering is not in your life. Suffering is a mentally created misery that we create for ourselves. And so if we've stopped creating these miseries and problems for ourselves, it helps, or it allows the inherent happiness and joy to come through. Because I don't think it's that it creates joy and happiness. It is more like silence, in that when we cease making noise, there is silence. But as soon as we start talking, silence is destroyed. Same way, when we are creating our own miseries and suffering, we've destroyed, we've covered up joy and happiness, which is inherent. And so by these two measures, I would say are what I tend to highlight when somebody might ask me, how do I gauge my spiritual progress? I would say by the degree of the absence of thought and the degree of absence of suffering and the degree of joy and peace in your life. So those are the two main ones. There's some other ones people will talk about, but those are the two that I think are the best. So thank you much.